good for our audience to know that they should always ask for the badge number and the officer's name, and they have to give that to them. If they don't give it to them, then you write down their police car license plate.
Well, I would think that some people might be intimidated just by the officer being there, and they might feel that this might be challenging for the officer.
Well, if somebody felt that way, what they could do is they could call our dispatch number, which is 329-2413, and ask to speak to the watch commander, and then explain what had happened, and basically that they'd like to complain about the treatment they received or question the officer's actions.
And what would be done as a follow-up?
The officer, the watch commander would look into what happened. They'd be able to view that video, be able to evaluate what occurred, the claim that was made against the officer, or the complaint against the officer, and then also speak to the officer, and then if it's appropriate, make it a formal complaint. You know, it could be handled formally or informally, and it would be up to the individual citizen. And it could be a variety of things. It could be, you know, a mistake on the part of the officer. It could be a training issue on the part of the officer. It could be that the officer was acted inappropriately and could be subject to discipline.
Now, you talked about more or less filling out a form, and I'm wondering, is it true that because of budget cuts, the crime analyst position will be eliminated, and this is the person who analyzes the demographic data from police stops?
Correct.
Ah. So, what will that do in terms of the data collection and the racial profiling and finding out who is stopped and why they're stopped?
Well, from a perspective, not being a Palo Alto police officer, you know, I have been stopped, not in recent years. I'm always been wanting to be stopped, to be honest with you, in the last 2 or 3 years, and no one stops me for anything.
Yeah.
I don't get stopped anywhere, whether it's Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, wherever.
Your name is on the list. The do not stop list. Mine must have fallen off.
But when I did get stopped one time as a teenager, and that's what I'm concerned with, is young people won't know their rights. And what to me is really important is that we have to get this word out to our young people, specifically young people of color, of knowing their rights. And we kind of covered some of that in our youth summit last year, but we need to get that widespread, because when they get stopped, they want to say, "Why'd you stop me?" And they might start calling them the police officer names and whatever, intimidating the police officer with their comments. And that just leads to escalation and what have you. But if the youth of today know their rights, then they'll know how to get that police officer's name and that badge number. But if they don't, then they could be very intimidated to where they won't call a phone, they won't email, they won't call the hotline or anything like that. They'll just let it go on, because that's what has happened year after year after year.
Now, there seems to be an assumption that you can ask the police officer for his or her name or badge number, and the officer will comply. But the officer doesn't have to comply. The officer is the one in charge, and the officer might take offense at being asked those questions. So how do we know what the response might be?
Well,
and then it's the officer's word against that person's word.
It's the policy of the police department that you'll provide that information, and every police officer has a name tag on their right side of their chest, and it should be visible. And again, should the case be somebody felt intimidated, you know, getting the vehicle number is a great idea. Also, all our officers call in their traffic stops or pedestrian stops, so there would be a record of somebody being stopped at a certain location at a certain time. So if you didn't have that person's name, it wouldn't be as critical, because we'd be able to backtrack.
And how long do you keep those records?
We keep those records for years and years and years.
Even the videotape?
The videotape is at least 2 years.
Okay, Harold, you were going to say something.
Let me add something to what this conversation is all about. Pastor Baines mentioned a moment ago the importance of citizen participation. When you're stopped and you feel that you were stopped wrongfully or illegally or racial profiling, it's incumbent upon you. It is imperative. It is your responsibility to let the authorities know. So I'm begging and asking citizens, whether you're from Palo Alto or surrounding communities, take responsibility for your welfare.